Okay, Mr. Jones here. This week we're going to draw a real still life, a real object. The reason it's called a still life is that it stays still, it doesn't move, and it's a real life, it's not a photograph or anything. We need to find an object that has at least 3 colors, so even though it kind of looks like Donald Duck is predominantly white, he has yellow, blue, and red. So that's 3 primary colors. But also we'll find out later that the white there is not quite white. So first thing I'm going to do is very lightly draw my still life. Okay? You want to do this as lightly as possible so that when you are done, the pencil lines go away. So don't draw too dark. Okay, now that I've sketched it out lightly with pencil, I'm going to start watercoloring. One thing you'll notice with my tray is I clean the lid here. I'm going to use that for my mixing of colors and to test my colors. So you just wipe it. If you don't have that, you should have a lid to your tray, but you could use a plate. But you just have to make sure it's glass or plastic, something shiny. And white's nice because then you can actually see what the colors are going to be. So I'm actually going to start with purple or violet, and I'm going to use that to help shade my area that are blue, but I'm also going to use it in some of my other areas, and that'll help just kind of tie the picture together a little bit. So this is going to be sort of my shading for the blue. I do have highlights. You have to be very careful, especially if you have a shiny object like this, that you sort of leave those areas that are going to be white. Make sure you leave them white. Okay, as you can see, I've kind of used purple everywhere, mostly where it's blue on there, because that will be a nice shading for my blue area. So, but I did use it all over the place to kind of just do some basic shading there. Again, you could use black for that, or you could use brown if you wanted to. Depends on your object. I just tend to like to start things with that. So now I'm going to add the blue to my area. So here you see I'm checking it to make sure it's not too dark on my tray. And now I'm going to come in and just over the top. I let this dry for a little bit so that it wouldn't mess up the violet too much, but you see it already has my shading I need for my blue on here with the purple, and I'm making sure that I leave the highlights that I see white there because it is a metal toy and it's kind of shiny. Okay. Now my view of the object is different than your view of the object. My view is from a slightly different angle, so you might look at it and go, well, it doesn't look like what I see. That's because I'm looking at it from a slightly different angle. So now I'm going in and adding my blue. So I'm just going to concentrate on the blue areas for right now and work on that. Okay, as you see, I've just done the blue parts of Donald Duck here, and I tried to leave where I saw some highlights, where the light's hitting it and everything from my angle. Okay, now I'm going to work on the yellow parts. Now the thing is that I look at this yellow and I look at this yellow, and this is an older toy, so it's kind of aged over time. So it's not actually this yellow. It's a little bit, I see some brown in there. This is the tricky part of matching real colors that you see, is that usually it's not that pure color that you see. So what I'm going to do is mix a little bit of brown into my yellow here, so I can get closer to that actual color that I see in the yellow. Okay, and I'm going to come in here, and remember, it's always easier to start lighter than what you think it is, and then you can add more color to it. You can see how it's sort of blending with my purple to create shading. It adds a little bit of that extra shading there. And again, where I have some of those shiny highlights, I'm making sure I'm leaving those white shapes in there so that I still have those. And so now I'm just going to take this sort of brownish yellow and paint in the yellow parts of the still life. As you see now, I've painted the yellow parts using a little bit of that brown there to get more of that color of the old toy. So sometimes it's tricky to match that. Now there's only one part of my toy that's red, so I'm gonna do that real quick. Let's get some red. I'm checking it on the tray to make sure it's not too bright or too dark. And since I already did the purple for the shading, all I really need to do here is just put my red on there. Now if I want it to be a little bit more vibrant, I can add a little bit more of the red there, just to get it close to that. I don't want it to stand out too much since it's the only red thing on my toy. Okay, now here comes the tricky part. I finished with the red. Notice that I cleaned my tray here. You can just wipe it off with a wet paper towel or a wet Kleenex, something like that. So most people would look at this and say, oh, that's all white. Well, if you look at it, it's not really white. Look at the white of the paper and then look at that. Okay, it's got more of a yellow, brown, and almost a green tint to it. So I'm actually going to mix that. So I'm going to take some yellow and I'm going to take a little bit of brown. And that's the tricky part, is to too much brown. Which is okay, because I can start here with my yellow again and just add a little bit of the brown. So that's getting close to sort of that color. Now I don't want it to be yellow like my yellow is in the picture. So this is going to be really watered down, so it's very see-through, so it's not going to be quite as much. Now I'm going to add just a teeny bit of green to it, because it does have just a touch of almost green in it. So I'm going to do that, mix this together to create sort of my dirty white color that's there. So I want this to be really, really subtle. I don't want it to be too bright. Just enough to that. Now I already did some shading with my purple, so I don't really have to shade this too much. You see, it's not quite the yellow that I did there, so I don't want it to be that yellow. I want it to be different. It's resembling sort of that dirty old yellow on there. So I'm going to go through here and paint all my white areas that aren't actually white. They're dirty color. Okay, so I have painted the white areas, which aren't actually white, with that sort of dirty old looking thing. There are parts of my toy that are black, so what I'm going to do right now is get my black here, and very carefully, I don't want it to stand out too much, but I'm going to paint those areas that are black on there. Remember, you want to let your colors dry in between your working on them, so that they don't blend together. So again, I'm being very careful because I don't want to get too black. Now this object here is silver, so I'm going to use the black in this little thing here, and I'm going to use that to kind of do the highlights on there. Oops, too dark, but it's okay if you get too dark. You can always take water and blend it out. there. Those. And so I'm going to let this dry for a little bit. And then I'm actually going to paint some of the black, like on the eye and stuff, the highlights there. It is dried enough, I think, that I can do my little the black sort of writing that's on there. Again, I want to make sure this is not too intense, not too dark. So I'm going to go in here and go on features, toy. So you see it's not the black, it's kind of, because I can always darken it if I need to a little bit. I can always come back and make it darker. So it's always easier to start a little lighter than you know it's supposed to be, and then you can come back and do that. It's very important that it's dry first before you do this, so that it doesn't blend in with the other colors. Okay. Then I'm going to use the black in some of the areas where there's the line of the toy, because the lines that are on the toy, just to kind of enhance those just a little bit, but I don't want to do too much. I don't want it to look like I did a pen and ink drawing or anything like that. I'm just going to use a little bit of it to kind of do some of those areas. Maybe I want a little bit more shadow. Yeah. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to darken that a little bit. Just a little bit. More like the toy. And so I'm being very careful about how much, the black I put on here. I don't want to overdo it. Ruin the picture. Go, and I think the toy is almost done. Now I need to make a decision about the background. Now I have it sitting on a black piece of paper, and so actually this line here is the back line of the paper. So I'm actually going to paint the bottom part black. Again, I'm not going to make it super black. I want it to be kind of see-through. So I'm going to water down that black a lot. And then I'm just going to come in here. Now I did some shading with the purple down below the toy, so it would have a little bit of a shadow there. Hopefully that'll still be there when I get done putting this on there. And it's okay if watercolor is supposed to be uneven and not perfectly solid, so it's okay if it's kind of looks splotchy like that. Okay, so I'm going to go around and fill in. See, I've painted most of the bottom with the black, and now I decided to make the background brown, but I added a little bit of black to my brown so it kind of fit in with the rest. Now again, if it goes on too dark, you can spread it out, add some water to it to make it a little bit more transparent. And even if it's dried, you can come with water and break it up. Unfortunately, if you put it on too dark, it'll keep those lines there of where you put the brush strokes, so you have to be very careful about that. And you could always try that wet, paint it wet first, and then paint the watercolor on top of that. So if I were completing this picture, I would go ahead and paint the whole background in. But for this, I'm just going to leave it at that for right now. So that's how you paint a toy and match the natural colors that you see.